Hello and welcome on in to the Twisted Turnbuckle Podcast. I am Chris DiCarlo. Underneath me is the man with class, Mike, the class DiCarlo from Rhode Island. How are you?
I'm good, everybody.
Always in the corner to my left, he is the producer, the podcast host, internet radio DJ, Mr. Benny Scala.
That name is perfect because I am as twisted as they come.
And underneath Benny is our special co-host, where we'll get into our special main event guest in a bit. But he is author, actor, improv, artiste, Mr. Mike Messier. Welcome.
Hey, Chris. Hey, Mike. Hey, Benny. Good to see everybody. And for our viewing audience, glad to see everyone out there. Great to be here.
Yes, we are the same bunch of guys. Like I said, made my post on Facebook and Twitter. Same names, same show format. We just changed the title to the Twisted Turnbuckle Podcast. Benny, that is a great logo. Sorry, I love it.
The wonders of AI. I'm going to do a Barry Horowitz here because I messed around with it one day. I said, you know what? Let me see if it'll do this. And then, I mean, it's amazing what AI can do.
I love them both, but we're going with this one. I love it even better with the mask over the mic and everything. What do you think, Mike Messier? Pretty cool.
Yeah, I think the mask on the mic, if people are listening to us on the radio, if you check out the YouTube version, you can see the logo that Benny put together of the Twisted Turnbuckle Podcast, and the microphone is wearing like a wrestler mask, and I think it looks pretty awesome.
Or eventually you can buy a T-shirt and have it like right on your chest.
That's right. We're going to get into the T-shirt business in the coming weeks, and we'll have more information about that. And
I have to acknowledge this guy, Lawrence, because he's on all our shows, all the way from Australia. What a great guy! So greetings, Lawrence.
Yes.
Thanks for always being here for us.
Yes, again, I was going to say we are live on the Playa Entertainment Network YouTube channel. Benny, we got over 200.
We have our guest of honor.
And here he is, our main event guest for this week. He is formerly known as Maxx Payne in the WCW. He wrestled in CWA and CWA Germany. Mr. Darryl Peterson, Maxx Payne, welcome, sir.
It is an honor. Thank you. I'm sorry I'm late. I had a family emergency crisis, and I was hoping I was going to make it right on time, but I just cut her close, so I didn't want you to think I wasn't going to show today.
Oh, no problem. We appreciate your time, and we understand.
I hate being late, though. It's like my worst pet peeve, and so I saw it coming. I tried to give you enough of a warning, but sorry. Anyway, let's go. I'm ready.
Mr. Payne, I have a quick question. How is the weather in the state of Euphoria?
You know, I got to tell you, man, I live in Idaho, and you know, it's funny because normally it's cold as can be here. It really is. I mean, Idaho is notorious for, a couple of winters ago, we literally had one of the worst winters in history here. And it's 65 degrees outside, and the rest of the country is suffering so dramatically that I feel spoiled. So in honesty, this Euphorian is like living on cloud nine right now. The only sad part about that is usually that means a really fiery summer. And so the downside of that is it's going to be dry as hell, but it's really nice in the state of Euphoria right now.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well, we're freezing here up in the Northeast near Niagara Falls. Mike is in Rhode Island. And Mike Messier and Benny are in the Sunshine State, so they're warmer than us.
Not much sunshine today, though.
Well,
the Floridians.
Before we get going, Mr. Payne, we got to plug our friend there, Mike Messier. Go ahead.
Hey, Max, it's great to be here. This is my artwork. I do visual art, and I write novels and stuff. Later play basketball. It's on Amazon, and my artwork can be purchased on the Foreign Object eBay store, and reach out to me through MikeMessier.com. But this is really an honor for me to talk to Maxx Payne, because I did get to see Max wrestle live and some of his bigger matches, including the Super Bowl III in Asheville, North Carolina. I was there to see Max not only play the national anthem to start the show, but he got a U.S. title match against Dustin Rhodes later in the show. And Chris, you mind if I just ask Max about it since we're on that topic already?
Well, if we can just show our clip, we'll go right into that. Benny, my video disclaimer, please.
Oh, hang on 1 second here.
This is under U.S. Copyright Law 107, fair use. These clips and videos are from my own personal collection, my own DVD library. I do not sell them. I do not rent them to nobody. They are clipped for the enjoyment of this show each and every week and to keep the topic of classic pro wrestling alive. And with that, Benny, let's play our Max clip.
All righty, here we go.
Salt Lake City, Utah at 3:03, a 1-fall 15-minute time limit match. Jerry Calhoun is the referee. Big Maxx Payne going against Reddy.
Calhoun still got a limp, Davey, from getting his ankle injured in there in that previous match.
Yeah, I asked Jerry a moment ago back in the...
Francisco. No, not mine, but perhaps his, growing up there. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, look at that, Dan. Submission maneuver by Man Mountain Rock. Man Mountain Rock using the whammy bar. Yes, Victorious showing no mercy. Why should he have any against the Black Fanaman? Speaking of mercy, Waylon Mercy will be in action a little bit later on. And loud have...
So some classic clips there of our main event guest, Mr. Maxx Payne. And
I'm honored, man.
That was Star Spangled Banner. Holy cow, that was great.
You know, I got to tell you, man, it's so amazing because I can't help it. If you were there, Mike, you know, do you guys cuss on this show, Mike?
Absolutely.
Okay. You know, from the beginning, you know that in a lot of ways, I hate to say this, but because I don't want to, I'm not bitter. I really am not bitter, but I have a lot of PTSD from the wrestling business. And part of it is because it started right there. Because in my opinion, they really fucked up with me. I could have made some people some real money. And that's all I wanted to do. The truth of the matter is I just wanted to have one really good run in the business. And I always believed, because I was the only legit guitar playing wrestler, that I could have made some money. And if I would have been Bill Watts at that moment, and I started, because Mike, I think you know this, when I first started to play the national anthem, the people were booing me because they didn't believe it was me. And by about 3 or 4 bars into the national anthem, if you watch the whole thing and the camera starts to go by the crowd, you can actually hear them and putting their hands over their heart going, holy fucking shit, he's really playing this. And the crowd was so into it. And if I would have been Bill Watts sitting back in the gorilla position watching that match, I would have said, Vader, get your ass out there, beat the shit out of him, destroy that guitar, and your angle is on right there for the rest of my career. You know, I would have been a baby face right then. You would have sent Vader out there, and Vader and I could have fucking toured the country because he stopped me from in the middle of playing the national anthem. And I finally get my guitar back, and I play the national anthem. It's some big fucking deal down the road. And to me, I don't know if you know this, but they only let me play the guitar one other time in the WCW. And quite honestly, the WWF wasn't much better because the WWF, they had Jim Johnston, who was so jealous of me being able to play the guitar. He wouldn't let me. In fact, all of the things I did in the WWF as Man Mountain Rock wasn't me playing. It was Jim Johnston, because he was so jealous and was so in control of the music in the WWF. They wouldn't even let me play my own guitar. And that's one of those moments when I should have said, fuck you, I ain't doing it. And that's the only thing I regret, is I wished I would have said no to them demanding, because I hated Jim Johnston's tone. I didn't like any of that shit that they did with the Mountain Rock character. And, but if you remember that night in Asheville,
Oh yeah, I remember.
when I came out to wrestle, you could have heard a fish fart in that building because nobody wanted to boo the guy who just played the fucking national anthem.
Yeah, I can.
Everybody wanted to cheer for me, and that was the hardest match I ever did in my life. It was Everybody sat on their hands because it was a babyface match.
Yeah, it was a bit convoluted, Max, because the way I remember it, you were actually a last-minute substitute for Ron Simmons, and Ron Simmons, like 6 months earlier, was the world champion as a babyface, and he was kind of in a tweener mode, about to turn full-on heel against Dustin Rhodes, and I think Ron had another shoulder injury or a foot injury or something, and you, the way that I remember it, Max, you were like pretty brand new, like maybe a month, if that, into the company.
Oh no,
so,
dude. No, dude. I literally had just driven from my fucking home in Utah that night. That was my debut in the wrestling, in the WCW, was Asheville that night. It's a funny story. I actually ran out of gas on the freeway and was afraid somebody was going to steal my guitar and my amplifier out of my car. That was back when you didn't have cell phones. I had to walk to the next off ramp because I was so busy worrying about where I was going. I fucking ran out of gas on the side of the freeway. And so it was one of those moments I couldn't wait to get there. And then I've been practicing the national anthem, because you can't fuck the national anthem up,
Right.
So I had literally been practicing nonstop to make sure I could playing the national anthem off. And so, like I said, to me, it was one of those moments that no promoter really saw the opportunities that they could have made money with me. And on top of that, Bill Dundee said it best to Mick Foley and I a couple of years later. We were driving down the road, and Bill Dundee looked me right in the eyes and said, "How does a big, ugly, fat fucker like you ever think that the crowd will buy him as a babyface?" And that's exactly what my uphill battle was all the time. They didn't see Mick and I being baby faces because we didn't fit the, baby blue, pink, patent leather boot wearing baby face moniker that they wanted to pin on us. And they just hated us because we didn't fit that mold. And we were just big, ugly, fat fuckers that somehow people liked us, just like that night in Asheville. People dug it, and they really missed that opportunity.
I think that they were thinking that the fans in Asheville, North Carolina, were one-dimensional rednecks, and they underestimated the crowd. Yeah. And the crowd got it because, like as you said, the crowd started booing, almost being trained. We got to boo the bad guy. Right. But then by the time they're listening to 10 seconds worth of the national anthem and it kicks ass, they're like into it. And then, like you said, when you're coming out to wrestle Dustin, who, of course, was legacy talent, Dusty's son and everything, and people did like Dustin Rhodes, but it was just a thing where that show was a lot of fun for me as a fan. You had the Vader Sting strap match. You had the return of Ric Flair. You had Scorpio and Chris Benoit doing 19 minutes and 59 seconds. And then you were a big part of that, and I think really set the pace for the night with the national anthem. In preparation for this show, I remembered, and you kind of alluded to it just a few seconds ago, but probably your best thing in WCW was the Cactus Jack tag team. Absolutely. And I believe it was Super Brawl 4, the Chicago Street Fight. Yeah. And you guys were killing the Nasty Boys, and they were killing you. I mean, talk to us about that. Was there real heat with those guys, or were they just reckless, or what did you think about the Nasty Boys?
Man, I got to tell you, let me start with this, and I'm going to say this. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I fucking love Knobs and Sags. I did, man. I could sit here for hours and tell you stories that would just blow your mind about how much fun I had with those guys. And some of the most incredible moments of my life in the wrestling business was with Brian and Jerry. And you know, it's one of those things that I was like the 12-year-old brother that goes on a date with 3 people, and I always was the guy that because Mick was a big star in the WCW, the Nasties, they'd already had a couple of runs in the WWF, and they were fucking huge hills in the WCW. And so when it come to any kind of planning, and whenever it came to us preparing our matches, I always got left in the wings, you know. And we were wrestling in Georgia one night, and in Albany, Georgia, and you know, a great wrestler by the name of Bill Eadie said something to me when I was in Japan, when I first was breaking in with Chris Benoit in Japan. And he said something to me I carried my whole wrestling career. He said, you know, Max, there's going to come a time in the business where you got to say no. And if you don't say no, the only guy you got to blame is the man in the mirror. And, you know, these guys would plan everything and leave me out of it. And so when we were in Albany this night, I'd had enough. And I had a rep because I was, you know, first of all, I was a NCAA All-American, so I was a shooter. Second of all, I broke in Japan with, honestly, I can go through the list of greats. Thirdly, I was taught submission wrestling by the great Fujiwara. So not only did I know how to amateur wrestler, NCAA and freestyle and, you know, upper body, you know, anything throwing wise, but now I added submission wrestling, being taught by truly one of the, if not the greatest submission wrestler to ever come from Japan in Fujiwara. And you know, he just spent it, because when you train in Japan, you were lucky enough to do that. So I had it wasn't a rep. It was, and I don't want to say fear, because it may sound like I'm trying to make myself out to be a badass, but I can take care of myself. And
you were legitimate.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
you were legitimate.
Right. And so, you know, I went to Knobs and Stags. You know, they were all, I'll never forget this. We were in Albany, and the 3 of them were over there standing and planning the fucking match. And I'm sitting right there, and not once did any of the 3 say, hey, Max, come over here and let's talk. And finally, I just stood up and I walked over, and I stood up and I stood next to Brian and Jerry, and I said, I'm going to tell you something right now. I'm going to get my shit in tonight, and either you're going to go with me and you're going to trust me, or you're not. And if you don't, you're going to get hurt. And Brian, I'll never forget Brian go, God, Payne, you don't got to be like that. I said, I'm not being like that. I said, but I have a right to get my shit in. I'm going to get, and then so they all said, okay, right? And so when Brian got the infamous spot where everybody blames me for Knobs getting hurt, the only one to blame for that spot, and I've got a video of it on my YouTube channel called The Payne Lair, where I break it down and I show you exactly what happened and why that move failed. And it failed because Brian didn't trust me. And the reason Brian didn't trust me is because Brian didn't trust anybody, because the Nasty Boys were fucking notorious and infamous for fucking hurting people. the enhancement guys fucking if you were in the dressing room and that list went up for the enhancement guys, if the Nasty Boys were on the card, they would run to it to see if they had to work against the Nasty Boys, because they didn't care about hurting enhancement guys. And it was one of those moments where, you know, they a lot of times, and then on top of that, they would do stuff and it looked like shit, and yet it fucking killed you. You know, that's the worst moment, is they do something and fucking hurt you, and then it looked like shit. It's like, if goddamn, if you're gonna hurt me, at least make it look like $1 million, you know?
Right.
And so, you know, when I hurt Brian that night, and if you watch that throw, if Brian would have trusted me, I had his arm trapped, and if he would have let me throw him, he would have just flown across the ring. He would have been completely protected, and he would have flown right out onto the floor. But he didn't trust me. He tried to take his own bump. And as a result of that, he tried to resist a 350-pound guy who was trying to fucking throw him and protect him, which I'd done 1,000 times in my life and never hurt anybody. Instead, he tried to jump straight over the fucking throw with his arm trapped, and you can see what he does. He tries to take his own bump instead of trusting me, which I warned him before the match, if you do that, you're going to get fucking hurt. And he got hurt. And after that, Eric Bischoff pulled me underneath the bleachers and goes, you can't fucking, that's the moment that cost me my career in the WCW. And Eric pulled me under the bleachers and goes, fuck, you can't do that. You can't just go out there and hurt people. And I said, you know, Eric, I didn't just go out there and intentionally hurt Brian. I said, it was time for me to get my shit in. And I told him the Bill Eadie story. And I said, it was my turn for me to get my shit in. And I got my shit in. And Brian hurt himself. And I'm sorry he got hurt. But I did not hurt Brian intentionally. And like I said at the beginning of this whole conversation, I loved the Nasty Boys. They decided after that to systematically destroy me. Brian went straight to Hogan. He went through the business and he told everybody what a fucking piece of shit I was, how clumsy and how stupid I was. And he went out of his way to bury me. And from that moment forward, Eric Bischoff has never said anything nice about me. He's never liked me. And that was just part of the shit that I've dealt with, you know, my entire life, because I had the balls to stand up to somebody. And as a result of that, you know, that's what cost me. But you know what? I couldn't have it any other way. And I would rather have left the business standing up for myself and protecting myself and saying, look, you're not going to push me around any longer, than just continue to let them do whatever the fuck they want and me have no say in it.
Max, to clarify, to clarify, go ahead.
Sorry, Mike. We'll get to it. I just wanted to say hello and welcome to everybody in our live chat. Before I forget, we appreciate you. Benny will let us know about that. And I know, Benny, you have a question for Max that kind of relates to this, right?
Well, I met, and I'm sure you remember him, Mike Halleck. I met him actually a couple of months before he passed away. And in doing the research for this show, I realized that when you were in Ketch in Germany, you wrestled him when he was Bruiser Mastino, and in the WWF, you wrestled him as Mantar. And I think he's another one, very similar to you, tremendous worker that was just not, given the proper utilization that he deserves. So I was just wondering if you have any memories of Mike Halleck.
Man. So one night, it's ironic and you're bringing up Mantar. Not very many people talk about him when I get interviewed. So thank you for bringing him up, because I loved Mike. God damn.
What a nice guy he was.
Yeah. And, Otto was pissed at me because I'd lost a bunch of weight and I wasn't the 400-pound monster he wanted. I was only 340 pounds. And so he had to hire Bruiser Mastino to bring him in. And even though Mike was 5 inches shorter than me, you know, I was still, Jesus, I mean, I was still 6'5", 340 pounds. And I guess I wasn't big enough, you know. So anyway, when they brought Mike in at first, I was a little bit jealous. But then after I met Mike, and, you know, I Red Bastien taught me well. You can't, you know, do your own shit, shut up, and just get yourself over and let, you know, you can't change that kind of mentality in the business. So take advantage of what you got. And by then I was really committed to doing the guitar playing wrestler thing. And I knew that was going to have a serious impact in Germany, which is where I really started the gimmick. And when Mike came, we very quickly became really, really great friends. And I've got, you know, memory after memory of Mike, and we were great friends all the way through our career. And ironically, the first street fight I ever did was with Fit Finley and Mike Halleck versus Chris Benoit and myself. Wow. And we did an Irish street fight, and we fought through the building. And that's, you know, that's one of those moments, you know, like when you talk about Chris and concussions and CTE. I remember that night, man. Chris was so giving of his body. He got on the top rope and jumped, and I launched him on top of that. I'll bet you he did 15 feet in the air to do that flying headbutt he does. And, you know, he hit so hard that night. And Chris just was just one of those guys that was so sacrificial when it came to his willingness to give in the business. But Mike and Fit and I and Chris and I, we fought through the building. And that was, so the funny part about it is that street fight that I did with Mick against the Nasties, I'd already done that 3 or 4 times in Germany, and I already knew about it and how it worked because of that. And Mike was so funny because in Germany, it's awesome because you live in a trailer, and you know, it's such a different, oh God, I love it. The memories of Germany are so beautiful because in Germany, the way it works is you would, like, for example, in Hanover, you would rent a trailer, like a camping trailer, and we would park behind the building on this place called the Schützenplatz, and you would park behind the building, and you would literally live on site. Hanover, I think we were there for 67 days, and we played every night in the same building. And Mike and I became such good friends, and it was so funny. I could always tell, first of all, because I was older and had kids and was kind of the father figure, I kind of ended up being kind of a father figure to Mike in that time because I taught him a lot about working as a big man, and we worked together a lot in Germany. But he would come to my trailer, and he had a specific knock, and I always had food and Coca-Cola. And he would come to my door in the trailer, and he'd knock on the door, and I'd open, and he'd go, hey, Darryl, could I come in and get a sandwich and a Coke? And I said, fuck, of course, get your ass in here. And we'd sit around, smoke hash all night, and fucking eat sandwiches and drink Coke and watch MTV. I had a tape, like it was I'd taken a VHS and put it in 8-hour mode. And so that was the only thing I had. And so we watched this same MTV VHS tape over and over again. And it was right when Nirvana came out with Smells Like Teen Spirit. So we'd sit in my trailer, get high, burn candles, laugh our asses off, and eat these incredible sandwiches and drink Coca-Cola. And we were just great friends. And I loved Mike Halleck. He's absolutely a loss to the wrestling business. And you said it right. He just never, it was during the era in the WWF when he came in, they just didn't use him right. And they just didn't give him, that opportunity, but he was a great guy.
There we have a question for Maxx, right, Benny?
Did Maxx work with JBL while in Germany? JBL tells similar stories.
Yeah. Who's Jay? Tell me his name again. I'm sorry.
John Bradshaw Layfield.
Yes, absolutely. And Bradshaw was, oh my God, I loved him too. He was great. I don't have, when it comes to Germany, I don't have any bad memories of Germany because, I got to work with Dave Taylor and Fit Finlay and Steve Wright and, all the people that came through. And then Chris Benoit is actually the guy who got me my Germany gig. And so, Germany is just, oh, wow. And it was like the perfect place for Mike because it's a great way to learn with no pressure because you're in Germany, and so he would, we'd go out and you could try anything and get away with anything because nobody would see you in the States. So it was the perfect learning ground on top of the fact the food was great. The women were great. The life of living in a trailer and like I said, living, actually on the site. That's where I developed the Maxx Payne character, and Dave Finlay, he was my biggest support structure during that time. In fact, I got to say that Dave Finlay probably was the most important character who forced me in to exploring the Maxx Payne character and actually making it happen. And I had 4 or 5 guys that were behind me then. But that was also the first time when I saw jealousy and other people that, didn't want me to do that until when I started to do my gimmick in Germany, in Hanover. We went from 150 people a night to 500 to 1,000 a night because people loved the gimmick. Because I would go out and I'd play Guns N' Roses, and I'd play Kiss, and then I'd recorded my own backing track. I had a friend in Germany who worked for a record company, and he helped me build my first backing track. And when I started playing, Hanover had sucked ass in terms of, the audiences that came. And when I started playing, the house turned, and none of the boys, nobody doesn't like to wrestle in front of a lot of people. On top of the fact, when the house is full, you get to sell your merchandise. And so everybody started making more money, and it's a hell of a lot funner to be done in the night after working in front of 1,000 people than it is after working in front of 100 people. And it was great. So I have nothing but great memories of Germany.
Mike the Class, a question, and you were in Germany back in '92, weren't you, in the military?
Yeah, I was there for 3 years. Really good food. I mean, it was good. I enjoyed my time over there. I had nothing bad to say. I stayed there the whole 3 years, and then when it was time to go, that's when I left. But I do got a question as far as your amateur background. How did that translate? I mean, did they give you a step up, like when you first got into the business?
It's so funny because I'll be honest with you. I've told this isn't the first time I've said this, and I mean this. When I first started thinking about, well, let me put it this way. The last interview I did with the Iowa State newspaper, school newspaper, they asked me if I was going to be, following Chris Taylor's footsteps and be a professional wrestler as well. And I said, are you out of your fucking mind? That shit's all fake. I said that publicly at the time. And I really didn't want to be a pro wrestler at the time because there's such a pride that goes with being an amateur wrestler. And when people would say, they'd ask me because I was a big fucker, I'd say, hey, yeah, you know, they ask, what do you do? And I'd say, oh, I'm a wrestler. And they'd go, oh my God, I watch that on TV all the time. And my first response was always, no, you don't. You've never seen me wrestle, I guarantee, or what I do once, because you're thinking of the other shit and I do the real shit. And so there was a stigma incredibly laid across your back of, you know, when you're an amateur wrestler and a professional wrestler, most people don't, you know, not most, but a percentage of people don't know the difference, you know, that there is a huge difference, especially in the South. And so there was such a stigmata attached to that, I got to say, that when I first met Red Bastien and I thought about, you know, and I decided I was actually going to go for it. When I got in the ring the first time and, you know, Red closed the door and said, okay, wrestling's fixed and, you know, the outcome's predetermined and this is how the business works. I thought that it was really going to piss me off, but instead I loved the idea, because amateur wrestling, if any of you have been an amateur wrestler, amateur wrestling is fucking hard, and it is a very, very difficult endeavor. And believe it or not, especially as a heavyweight, because I've been in situations where, in fact, my national title in the junior college was our national title came down to the heavyweight match in Worthington, Minnesota. And so, you know, there's a lot of pressure on you if you're the heavyweight, because there were many occasions where if I won the match, we won as a team. And so when I finally saw what pro wrestling actually was, I was so excited by the fact that I didn't have to deal with the pressure of and the nerves and all of the shit that goes along with being an amateur athlete and going out and facing guys like Rick Steiner. You know, he wrestled for the University of Michigan, and I faced him, and guys like Dan Severn, who wrestled for Arizona State, and you know, that shit makes it Gary Albright and John Tenta. They were all amateur wrestlers too. And they would all probably tell you the same thing, that when you got to give up the anxiety that goes along with being an amateur wrestler and facing, you know, the unknown, when you go out there and dealing with the pressure of being an amateur wrestler in that sense, it was like the weight of the world was lifted off my shoulders. So I embraced it like crazy. And to answer your question, did it give me a step up? Yeah, in a lot of ways, because there were a few times when, because I was an amateur wrestler, it opened a door that maybe it would have, maybe it wouldn't have, but I'd like to believe that, like, I got a story that I could tell you, but I don't want to take up all the time telling stories like that. But I got a story with Jay Strongbow when I was still building the ring for Red Bastien in Los Angeles, because I started out at the very bottom. You know, the first thing I did when I started in the business was carrying jackets back and building the ring for the WWF on the West Coast, because Red was the West Coast agent for the WWF. And there were several times that being an amateur wrestler got me into a couple of situations that were absolutely incredible. In fact, that's what got me my introduction to Red Bastien, was the fact that I was a pretty renowned amateur wrestler from my home state of Utah. Mike Messier, go ahead.
Oh, there's so much to say. Jumping ahead a bit to your WWF career, you had this cutout guitar. A friend of mine he begged me to ask you if you held on to that, if you were able to keep that WWF logo guitar, because he he wants to make you an offer for it if you still have it. Speaking of selling merch.
You know, oh man, that whole era of my life is such a man. It's such a turmoil part of my life because I had some great ideas and I really, really wanted to be a part of the WWF. And I'm the one that came up with the idea for the guitar, and I'm the one that made all the arrangements with Hamer to have the guitar built. And it ended up being I paid for it, and you know, it's one of those things where at the time I loved it. You know, when we first started out, I was proud as shit of that guitar, and by the time I sold it, I was so pissed off at the time for the way I was treated that I couldn't get it out of my life fast enough. The irony of all of it is, Mike, that even if I still had it, you could never display it publicly. Even if Vince still had the guitar, he could never use it or display it publicly. I think
because of the F.
Got it, and I think it's in the basement of Stamford. I think it's in the basement of Titan Towers. You know, like fucking Rosebud in Citizen Kane. You know, I think it's back in a dungeon somewhere there because it can never be used. If I would have kept it, I probably would have painted a big international red. I probably would have painted it flat black and then painted a big international red no sign on it. You know,
like the Ghostbusters,
exactly,
line.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
If I would have kept it, that would have been the only way I would have kept it and used it. It was an amazing. Wow, it played so amazing. It was really an amazing guitar. But it had a really powerful stigma attached to it with me. And so, you know, I was hurting financially after I left the WWF, and I sold it years and years ago. And, you know, like I said, you know, I'm sure it's out. Honestly, I don't think it's out there. I don't think it's owned privately because there has been so many people talk about trying to buy it and find it, just like you said.
Right.
And I think if it was still out there, it would have showed up somewhere. I heard a story that Vince sent the Bronx Bomber to Vegas because it was at some guy in Vegas had it. And Vince wanted to make sure that, you know, he socked it away. And so he sent, oh God, what was his name? The
Brooklyn Brawler?
Yeah.
The Brooklyn Brawler, Steve Lombardi.
Yeah, I heard that he sent Steve Lombardi, Pat Patterson's bitch, to Vegas to buy it. And I really think that it's, like I said, I think it's in the dungeon of Titan Tower somewhere.
Well, Benny, I mean, to Max's thing there with the WWF, I think, well, they should have never got into that deal. I mean, you know, but it should have been the 3 Ws. Would have been Worldwide Wrestling Federation would have been better than WWE, in my opinion. I don't know, Benny.
Yeah. Max, what I absolutely loved your program with Mr. Backlund. I listened to one of his rants before. You're an abomination. Everything about you, your hair, your tattoos, your guitar. How was it like working with him?
Oh God, he's a night off. You know, Bob's just, and you know, it's really sad is when I left the business for 20 years and completely divorced myself from it. And finally, when I came back and did a show 3 years ago, he was there, and I went up to Bob, and he's got dementia so bad he didn't even know who I was. And Bob was an amazing guy. I really, really enjoyed working with him, even though the Man Mountain Rock character in the WWF, man, I got put in so many difficult situations playing that role. And like I said, that's one of those times in my life when forgive me, because I know there are people out there that love that character, and I wished I could have loved it in a different way, but they robbed me so flagrantly of my Maxx Payne character, and they wouldn't budge. Vince wouldn't fucking budge on letting me be Maxx Payne, and that's all I ever wanted in my life, was to carry on with the dark hair and the fucking heavy metal guy. And he wouldn't let me do it. He always compared it to the Undertaker, and I said to him over and over again, look, that's Taker, and he's the dead man. Don't compare me to Taker. Taker's fucking Taker. Nobody can be compared to Taker. Mark's is one of the, if not the greatest. I gotta say, he's up there as one of the greatest of all time, and nobody would argue with that even a millisecond. There's no comparison between the two of us. I wore fucking heavy metal shit and wore white t-shirts or black t-shirts with white writing, and everything I wanted to do was to be affiliated with heavy metal. And so, that was my whole goal behind it. So, and working with Backlund, it was perfect. It was a really great start. It's just that by that time, and by the time I really got knee deep in the Man Mountain Rock character, there's so many elements of this story that my whole career was collapsing on itself. And by then I was so unhappy with what was going on. And like I said, so many things that really, we could go on for hours. I literally could tell you stories for hours about what was going on. I won't do that. But, working with Backlund was such a blessing, because, hey, he's Bob Backlund.
Go ahead, Benny.
I'm having a deja vu moment. I had Sin Bodie on my other podcast, Dan and Benny in the Ring, several years ago. And his character, Kizarny, I loved it, but it never, it was a babyface, and it never got over. And I asked him, I said, why didn't it get over? He said, because they got it wrong. He said, I should have went out there and attacked like Tajiri and been this heel, and it would have gotten over like 100 times better. And I think maybe the same thing with you.
Yeah, but it's so funny because, man, I had God, man. I got to say this. I don't want to sound bitter. It's just the truth. I had so many elements that were against me. First of all, the Clique fucking hated me. I mean, everybody. Nash hated me. Scott Hall hated me. Triple H fucking hated me. And I've got a movie that's it's going to be out in the near future. And so you guys will, I'm sure you'll want to call me and have me come do this again with you once this movie comes out. I've been trying to get it out for 30 years, and now I've handed it over to somebody else who's going to finally get it done and get it out there. But I had so many, it's like every element that could, it was like Murphy. I swear to God, I felt like I was living Murphy's Law. Everything that could go wrong in my career at that moment in time went wrong. And so therefore, I'm not a organized religion guy, because I was born and raised in Utah, and I was born and raised a Mormon. And but you get to that point where you go, God, it felt like an obvious sign is get the fuck out. You know what I mean? Because everything I tried to do, and I mean everything at that moment in time, all of my best friends, Mick Foley is a classic example. I mean, our relationship fell apart, and through no fault of my own. And Mick will tell you that. If you ever asked him, he would tell you, I love Mick Foley with all of my heart. but he blew up our relationship, and it was because of his own feelings and for something in the end that wasn't even true. And it's one of those moments where, when it just, if you feel like you've got that kind of destiny against you, I would wake up sometimes and go, I can't get out of this. I mean, it just felt like everything that could go wrong was going wrong, which is part of the reason I did the movie, is because I wanted some physical evidence to show Vince that giving the right opportunity with Man Mountain Rock and with me playing the guitar in the ring, that there was potential. If Vince would have thrown his might into the Maxx Payne character in the WWF, I honestly believe that it would have been one of those. I mean, God, I think Taker and I would have been spectacular doing shit together. Two big guys. I could go out and play. Eventually, we could have done something together. But there's a long story about the problem I had with Taker through no fault of my own. It just happened to be a wrestling history piece that I couldn't change. You know what I mean? Sometimes there's elements that come up in your life and in your career that things happened in your prior life that there's God and all these angels can't change that situation. And that's what was so difficult about my life at that time.
Mike Messier, talk about movies. You got one coming out too, don't you?
Yeah, my buddy Tommy DiNucci directed The Roaring Game, which has Rob Gronkowski from the New England Patriots and Mickey Rourke. Of course, Mickey was in the Wrestler movie many years ago, but basically I'm in this movie, and the gentleman that played the Iron Sheik in the Young Rock show is in it. And it's about the sport of curling, when you see the guys with the two sticks. Yeah, so we've well, the one, maybe the only comedy about curling and romance will be out tomorrow, February 6th, on all types of streaming. Thank you. Yeah, so I'll be in that one, or I am in that one, and looking forward to it. And when Max was talking about movies, you took the words out of my mouth, Max, because I found that a preview that looks like it was 17 years old. And in this preview for your movie, it's a documentary.
Yeah.
And it looks like you filmed it on the road. And guys, I don't know if other guys saw this, Chris and Benny and Mike, but you've got footage of Rob Radford, Louis Spicolli, Owen Hart is in this. This is like the real deal. This is like 1994, 1995 WWF, what they would call the new generation era, what was kind of sandwiched in between the golden era and the attitude era. And I guess Kevin Nash was probably the champion at the time. Diesel and Sid's in there, and it kind of feels like a worked shoot. Like you're talking about how the clique is out to get you, and there seems to be like. And I'm watching some of your stuff today, not just this preview, but some of your other stuff, and I'm like, it finally clicked when you started talking on this podcast. I think like Superstar Graham had a DVD, Born 20 Years Too Soon. I think you were born too soon, because the stuff that you were doing and being an independent thinker, like Shane Douglas would say, it's almost like you would have been better suited for ECW 5 years later, or even AEW 15 or 25 years later, because it seems like you having the creativity, kind of like a Bray Wyatt, 10 years ago, like you as an independent thinker, not part of the machine, and not wanting to be castrated by the machine that is corporate wrestling. I feel like that's the problem with the Maxx Payne career. It's not necessarily anything that you did wrong. It's just that you were the round hole, the square peg, whatever that metaphor is. It was just like the timing seemed to be off, Max. Any thoughts on that?
Mike, it's one of those things that, I watched Unreal, the first season of Unreal, just recently, And it's ironic as fuck. I'm really excited for this movie to finally come out. I will tell you, it's going to be painful because for me, because I lay barren who I am and my feelings at that time. And I always believed that the cool shit about wrestling was the shit that happened on the other side of the curtain. I mean, yeah, that's what wrestling's about, is all the pomp and circumstance of, as soon as you pass through the curtain, you go to the ring, you turn on the character and all that happens. But I always believed that the shit that happened south of the curtain, to me, was what would really turn people on to wrestling. And I from the beginning, I hated kayfabe. I always believed that wrestling could never ascend to the level it really. That's so funny. My cat's laying right next to me. My cat's right here. And it's, I watched this show called Road Rules. It was the first reality TV show ever. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, so I asked Vince, and part of the reason is like you're talking, Mike, is I really wanted to get that message out, that I wanted to work with bands. And I knew with Vince's muscle that I could end up working with Metallica. And, I wanted to be, I'll tell you what I wanted to be. I wanted to be the Paul Schaefer of the wrestling business. I wanted to be the guy who was a real musician that the wrestling business embraced, and that, would finally, because there were a lot of guys who tried to do that. Michael Hayes had an album, and there were a lot of other people that tried to do that kind of mentality, but just for whatever reason couldn't pull it off, and so I always wanted to do that. And it's funny because when my movie finally comes out, I had already written the soundtrack for the movie before I actually went and saw it, or before I went and shot it on my last, what ended up being posthumously my last tour in the World Wrestling Federation. And actually it was my last gasp of air, period. And so to say I was that, to quote a Tesla song called "A Man Out of Time," I think that's probably fair. It's funny, I heard Bruce Pritchard say, yeah, he's talking about me. Somebody asked him about, Darryl Peterson, aka Maxx Payne. He goes, yeah, Darryl just wanted to be, he wanted to be that behind the scenes guy. Like that was a bad thing. You know what I mean? Fuck, what do wrestlers do when they're done in the ring now? I mean, the entirety of, that's what you do, right? I mean, it just seems to me, and he said it as though I was stupid for wanting to be that guy. And, I wanted to help write music, but again, I had a powerful force so against me in Jim Johnston, who just wasn't going to let me be, I was infringing on his territory. And when you do that in the wrestling business, people will fuck you up. They will figure out how to bury you. And that happened to me in so many ways. And then I had some pretty powerful people really shit on me hard in a critical moment. And I'll tell you who it was. It was the rock star Steve Miller. Steve Miller was intended to be a critical part of what I was doing. And I'll tell you who else really turned their back on me and really.
Oh, we lost him.
Oh, we lost
Max.
him. Well,
Max.
sure he'll be right back.
They got him. They got Max.
Oh no!
They got him. He said too much. This is fascinating stuff, guys.
Yeah.
Here we go. He's coming back. But to fill in the blanks a little bit, I did see that preview. It's on YouTube somewhere. This is actual footage that Max took, like in 94, 95. You see Owen Hart. You see, like I said, Louis Spicolli, Kevin Nash, Sid, and of course Max himself. And it's like, I guess what happened is, I don't want to speak for him, but it seems like Max has licensed another outside party to finish the edit or the distribution. Maybe we'll get some more details, because I think that someone in the YouTube comments said that this Maxx Payne documentary, it's like the new Tom McGee Bret Hart match. Like, this is the lost media of professional wrestling that needs to come to the surface. So if this documentary that has a preview, the preview is 17 years old. So that's a like, people, like waiting for the Red Sox to win the World Series until 2004. Like, this is the generations have come and gone waiting for this documentary to be released. So I'm excited for it, as you can tell.
Wow. Mike Messier, I didn't hear you say the name of the movie tomorrow.
The Roaring Game, 3 words. The Roaring, ROARING Game, directed by Tom DeNucci, and it's a fun one. It's Tommy has never directed an adult comedy before. He's directed kids comedies, but not adult comedies. And I play Vitaly, the Russian curler. And like I said, Rob Gronkowski's in this, Mickey Rourke, some very attractive females in the movie, and just a lot of fun. I think people will see it and they'll enjoy it. And it was strategically released in time for the Olympics, the February 2026 Olympics. So if you're watching the Olympics, and if you need a break from the Olympics but you want to keep the same Olympic spirit, this is a movie that takes place at the World Games. Wink, wink, nod, nod. But it's about the sport of curling, and fits in perfectly with your wintertime celebrations.
Right, yeah, because tomorrow night is opening ceremonies from Italy. Benny, somebody said, does it snow in Italy? I said, well, I'm sure they're in the mountains, right?
I believe so, yeah.
So, yeah, it should be interesting. Got to check it out.
Yeah, I was really happy to be in that movie. And, speaking of pro wrestling, guys, just on current events, we've got the Super Bowl this weekend. I have to go for the New England Patriots. I don't know if we just totally lost Max or not, but the Patriots will be playing. And the Royal Rumble came and went. We've got Roman Reigns has picked CM Punk. Hey, we go. Here's Max.
I'm so sorry. Somebody tried calling me, and I'm on my phone. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. We're good.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so sorry, man. Sorry.
That's all right. Real quick, before I give it to Mike Messier, Mr. Payne, did you meet any stories of the Iron Sheik?
I never met him, but I know a lot about him.
Those Sheik tweets were hilarious.
Oh, they were great.
Sheik was anybody in the business knows a lot about the Iron Sheik, because everybody knows the story about the Sheik loving good gimmick. Everybody knows how much he loved his gimmick.
Yeah. In fact, Benny, when we have Mr. Vladimir Koloff on Hollywood Squares in a couple of weeks, I'm going to ask him, since he was good friends with Andre the Giant, how many beers did he actually see Andre drink?
I've heard upwards of 128.
Wow.
That was just getting warmed up.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Andre's very famous for that. There's no doubt about it.
Go ahead, Mike Messier.
Well, going back to what I asked you initially, the Cactus Jack, Maxx Payne, Nasty Boys feud, I believe, I could be wrong, but you guys had 3 televised World Tag Team title matches. There was a Clash of Champions. I actually had the order wrong earlier. It was Super Brawl 4 and then Spring Stampede in Chicago, which was on the Steamboat Flair show. That was the Chicago Street Fight. But in one of those matches, and maybe more than one, you are introduced as wearing the black trim with the white skulls by likely the most famous ring announcer of all time, Michael Buffer. Mm-hmm. And I'm watching this, and I forgot, like momentarily forgot, that the WCW, World Championship Wrestling in the mid-90s, they brought in Michael Buffer, and it was like a big deal because the way that I remember it, he would only announce like title matches or the main event or the Sting match. And I'm watching this, and I'm feeling really like good for you because I'm like, I know that your run in WCW, you know, I can understand that you have some disappointment with it, but I got to think, like, for anybody, boxer, wrestler, celebrity, to be ring announced by Michael Buffer in 1994, that's like Riddick Bowe, that's Evander Holyfield, that's Sugar Ray Leonard in one of his later fights. I mean, that's big time stuff. Was there any, do you have any memory of that particular moment? Like, were you like, holy crap, this is Michael Buffer introducing me?
You know, it's so funny you'd say that because I exactly felt that. You know, I mean, you know, when you stand in the ring and you're standing next to the let's get ready to rumble guy, and, you know, God, that's his trademark. And, you know, he copyrighted that whole thing. And, you know, and I got to meet him, and he was incredibly kind, and it was, you know, it was fun to be there. And just, you know, I was that eventually the whole story about that's going to come out. And I think it's an incredibly interesting story because Mick blew us up. You know, there's a reason. And quite honestly, the reason Mick blew our tag team up was because of Steve Miller. And it's a very long story. And you'll eventually hear it because it's all part of the movie. You know, my music, Mick was a huge fan of my music, and he would come to I brought a band together which was all wrestlers, which was Brian James, which was
Road Dogg.
Road Dogg, yeah.
Yeah, Road Dogg. And this was long before he was Road Dogg. In fact, that's a fun story in and of itself, how he got to be there, because originally his brother Brad was supposed to be the lead singer in my band, and he agreed to do it. And at the last moment, I mean, literally signed a contract with us and everything, and then took a powder, and I never saw him again. And it was Brian who courted me and begged me to let him take the place of his brother. So he took the place as the lead singer. I didn't even know him. I'd never even heard of it. I didn't even know Brian had another brother named Brian. And so Brian came on. The rhythm guitar player was Nick Patrick.
Yeah.
And then the guy who was my bass player and musical arranger at the time was a guy named Dr. Squash, who I'd met in Nashville when I was working for the Jarretts in the other CWA. And then I have a friend who actually plays in a Led Zeppelin cover band. He's a tribute, plays in a Led Zeppelin tribute band. And that tells you the caliber of drummer this guy is. And he's a lifelong friend. I grew up with him from grade school on. And so I spent a bunch of money that I got from cashing in my airline tickets in the WCW to build a studio in Atlanta. Actually, it was south of Atlanta, a place called Jonesboro, Georgia. And I built a studio. I bought the first, it was called an Elisa's Dream Studio. I bought and built a recording studio and paid for all these guys to come and be a part of it, including Brian, because Brian was just an enhancement guy at the time for the WCW. And I put together my dream, which was recording this album that I knew was going to be the soundtrack for a movie at some point. So I recorded the soundtrack for a movie I hadn't yet made. And so when this movie comes out, that music will all come with it. And so you'll get to finally hear the music. But Mick Foley, there were three guys who were relentlessly in my studio with us. And it was Mick Foley, who was there whenever he was in town and we were in town together. Mick Foley, Rick Rude, and Tex Schlesinger, Dennis Knight, they would come and they would fucking sit in the studio with us while we were recording this album that I self-produced and self-engineered. And it was amazing. And so Mick was this huge fan of what I was doing. And that's how the whole Steve Miller thing came to be. I ended up meeting Steve Miller and going to his house in Sun Valley. And that's, like I said, it's a long, long story. If you someday in the future, if you want me to come back on, you want to talk about that more in depth, I'll gladly do it. Or if you want to do it now, you just tell me. But it takes a while to get that story in successfully. And I'm sure you got a bunch of other questions. But Steve Miller was such an integral part of that. And Mick Foley loved Steve Miller. And Mick and I shared musically a lot together because we did the road, man. He had this old Chrysler. And I remember there's a great story out there about the time I introduced him to Tori Amos. And we actually did an interview using the Tori Amos moment when I introduced him to her version of Smells Like Teen Spirit. And we both sat there and cried because if you haven't heard it, it's on an EP called Crucify. And Tori Amos covers Smells Like Teen Spirit. And when Mick and I were listening to that and this driving across like West Virginia, way out in the backwoods, going to our next gig together, I introduced him to her and that song, and the tears were just poured down his cheeks. And so Mick was just, music was such an integral part of that. And so I hope I answered your question in all of that. But yeah,
well, we all love music. We all love music here, right, Benny? I don't know. You're the producer. It's up to you and Mr. Payne if we want to hear it this week or have him back another
Whatever
time.
you guys want to do is fine by me.
Like I said, man, you guys are amazing. So I'll come back as many times as you want me to. So that's no problem.
That sounds good.
But
we greatly appreciate you, sir.
It's actually a pretty amazing story, and sooner or later, it has to be told, and I love telling it, and because I really want it out there. So I'll do whatever you want. If you want to tell it now, that's fine. If you want to do it later, if you got more stuff, we'll just compact this interview, and you want to call, we want to do some other stuff down the road together, I'm fine with that too. So whatever you guys want to do, I'll do it.
Awesome. Well, you know what? We'll definitely have you back, and I think we'll do it then, Benny, because we all love music.
Sure. Absolutely.
And we definitely want to hear about Steve Miller. I haven't even seen him in concert at all yet. He might come to Seneca Niagara Casino this year. I don't know, but
I want to ask him what the word pompatus means.
It's funny because
I was wondering the same thing.
So I'll tell you, I'll give you a little glimpse of what happened is Mick was trying to bury me on national TV that I didn't know who Steve Miller was. He thought I was lying about having a friendship with Steve Miller. So Mick, years later, was on the Jimmy Kimmel show. And I'll send you a link to, I have the clip in my Dropbox. I'll send you a link so you guys can all see it. And if you decide you want to air it, I'm fine with that too. I'll let you be the one to decide. If I don't know how all of that works. I'm not that hip on social media. But Mick was on the Jimmy Kimmel show, And it just so happened that the musical guest that night was Steve Miller. So Mick wanted to prove to me and the world once and for all that I was not telling the truth about having a relationship with Steve Miller. So in the middle of this show, he whips out that, he goes, so my old partner says he knows you, kind of thing. And Mick got the truth from Steve Miller. And it's Steve Miller talking, the whole interview is him talking about me. But it's ironic that you bring up the Pompadour of Love thing, because right before he starts to tell the story about knowing me and how we ended up having a relationship in terms of musical relationship, he tells the story of what the Pompadour of Love and where that came from. And so it's actually a real cute story. So I'll send you a link to my Dropbox so you can go look at it. You can share it with everybody, Chris. But it's a really amazing interview, and it will confirm for you that I'm not full of shit. That one of the things there's no need to lie about something if you know somebody and you were fortunate enough to get to work with them. But in the end, Steve Miller in the end cost me my career in the WWF.
Wow.
Yeah. And nobody knows.
Chris, before you wrap up, I just to clarify, Max, the documentary footage we're talking about from 1995, have you basically sold the license or given permission to a different editor or a production team? And that question, and then attached to that, is there a title for this documentary footage as of right now?
Yeah. It's called The Thing That Should Not Be. And it's going to have kind of multiple titles attached to it, but I'm pretty sure, I hope it's called The Thing That Should Not Be. It was talked about as though it might be the real Maxx Payne, but that doesn't fit this movie. The Thing That Should Not Be is much more expressive of what the movie is about. I realized that, I did the whole thing. I shot it. I in-camera edited the whole thing. I created it. I wrote the soundtrack for it. And so, there comes a point in your life where, I realized that unless I let it go, and I could be talking out of my ass, the guy could decide that, I don't believe that's going to be the case. I'll be clear. But there's a chance that it won't come out. I don't believe that. But I got to tell you, I think it's going to come out, and I'm glad I let it go because it needed somebody else at the helm. On top of the fact is I don't monetarily, that doesn't matter to me about this movie. I mean, right. Because when I created it for a lot of reasons, and it wasn't to make money off of. I'm not saying that it won't make money, but that's not the reason that I did it. And so I did it because I wanted to show my creativity. And so I realized that in order for this thing to come out, it needed to be put in somebody else's hands. And the guy that it's in is an incredibly creative guy, and he's incredibly ambitious. And I really believe that he's going to get this thing out. And so I really look forward to him finally getting it out, and so the world can see it, because you're right. Now, 3/4 of the cast are gone.
Right.
It's got Bam Bam in it. It's got Mr. Fuji in it. It's got Yokozuna in it. It's got Rad Radford. It's got Owen Hart. Who else is in it?
Gorilla Monsoon in it?
No, it's good. Well, it's funny because everybody, one of the big questions is, how would Vince, there's no way this could actually have happened. Vince would never allow this. Well, let's be real fucking clear about something. This movie would have never happened had Vince not given me permission to do it. I mean, we all know Vince well enough to know that unless, I'll never forget Tony Gurria, when I came on the plane with my camera on, Tony looked at me and said, "Turn that fucking thing off. What are you doing?" And I said, "Look, Vince already told me I could do this." And he goes, "Bullshit." And I said, "You're going to have to call him, Tony." I said, "Because I wouldn't even try if Vince hadn't given me permission." And he said, "I'll be right back." So, of course, what did Tony do? Went straight to a fucking phone and called Vince on the phone. And Tony came back and said, "Well, Max, it looks like you're going to be shooting a movie." And the funny part about it is, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, Tony Gurria is so amazing in this movie. It's unbelievable. He's like that character in this movie that's such a standout in it that when you finally see the movie, there's going to be a lot of favorite things in it for most people, because this was unreal. This was unreal 30 years ago is exactly what it is, but instead of it being completely centered around Triple H, it's centered around me, because I was the one dealing with the fact that I knew that my career was over at the end of this tour. And I really needed a piece of evidence to show Vince that me playing the guitar in the ring, and had it not been for some incredible misfortune on Rad Radford's part, had it not been for Owen and Rad having a behind the scenes feud and him getting cologne sprayed in his eyes, I would have never played my guitar on camera, because the WWF, the Clique, had pretty much eliminated me by then, and they were dead set on me never playing my guitar in public again. But Lewis got hurt because Owen sprayed cologne in his eyes, and his face swelled up and his eyes swelled shut. And I'll just tell you this quick piece that was really amazing is they were going to do a Royal Rumble every night. They were going to do one of those matches. And I went to Tony and I said, "Tony, the reason you guys brought me on this tour is so I could play." I said, "You do realize you have probably the only wrestler in the world that can give you 15 minutes without an opponent." And he goes, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Let me go out and play at the beginning of the show every night. Since Lewis is gone, that way you don't have to do a Rumble." And what's that match called?
Royal Rumble match?
Yeah, is that what they're called?
The Battle Royal, where guys come in one at a time.
Yeah. I said, you don't have to do, because that's whenever somebody get hurt, that was a way they would fill that match, would be to have a battle royal to fill in for that match. And I said, "Tony, you don't have to do that. You could just let me go out and play every night." And so for the last 5 or 6 shows on that European tour, they finally let me go out and play my guitar every night in front of the crowd. And so that's how it finally happened. And now, this many years later, which is now 31 years later, you're going to get, the great thing about it is you don't have to believe me, because videotape doesn't lie, so when it finally does come out, you'll see for yourself that what I'm saying to you is all in the movie.
Well, Vince did allow Beyond the Mat and the Bret Hart documentary to be filmed also in the 90s. So how can people doubt you? And so, I think that your documentary...
but Mike, they even in that movie, they still attach themselves heavily to kayfabe.
Right.
That's what's amazing about my movie, is that they... there is some amazing shit that is so, like you were talking about earlier, that's so far ahead of its time.
Yes.
I mean, you got to remember, we were in the middle. That in 1995, fucking kayfabe was on like Donkey Kong, and they were trying their asses off to keep the business hidden. And
Well, the guys, the guys were talking openly. Correct me if I'm wrong, but just based on the preview, the guys are talking openly about steroids and drugs and stuff. So I mean, this was going really deep, right?
Like I actually have on camera, and I'll tell you this. I will give you a little insight. The irony of this is that I was sitting in the dressing room getting ready to go walk through the dressing rooms and film. Triple H walked in and he goes, "Hey, can I go videotape some stuff?" And I said, "Yeah." And you'll see in the movie, whenever I would walk around the guys and they were talking about a match, they would immediately kayfabe. And so Triple H says, "Let me go carry the camera around for a minute." And I said, "Okay." And he walks up on a match. I'm right behind him with him so I could, just be there with him because I wanted to see what he was shooting. I didn't want him to go in and shoot somebody's balls and be an asshole. And, so I wanted to make sure what he was shooting was something I could use. And he goes in and Bam Bam. And for some reason, I want to say, I'm pretty sure it's Sid.
Yes.
Sid was on this tour with us. And now, isn't it Sid?
I'd say Sid was in the clips that I saw. Sid was in there.
Was he? Okay, so I'm sure it's Sid. Sid's in this. And Sid, Bam Bam, DiBiase, they're all in the fucking dressing room planning their match. And because it's Triple H carrying the camera, they don't kayfabe. And so for the first time, that's really, everybody blamed the movie that I made on why I got blackballed in the wrestling business. And this is the reason why, is because there's a lot in this movie that there's no kayfabe going on. And that's what's really cool about it. The people who are real huge wrestling fans, especially if we're a wrestling fan of that era, you're going to flip out because, there's just so many great scenes of things that you've never seen before. And in a way that the WWF in that era would never in a million years show you.
Right. Unbelievable. Well, I can't wait to see it. And if your friend who's now in charge of distribution of this thing happens to watch this podcast, you got a lot of people now who are eager to see the finalized project, because this is like a time machine, a time vault, like something that was put in a time machine, and 30 years later it's being released. So I mean, I'm excited. Like I said, just seeing the preview, I couldn't believe what I was watching. Owen Hart and Rod Radford and Sid and everybody. So I'm psyched up to, if this takes another 6 months or a year or whatever it takes, I'll stick around.
I don't think it's going to be that long. I really don't. I think it's going to, he's really devoted. And like I said, now, like musically, that's the great thing, is there's no musical licenses to go after because I wrote all the music.
Yeah.
And
it's like the music from the Elder.
Yeah, right. It really is. And it's one of those moments where the soundtrack's already written. It was, like I said, it was written before. It's funny because I didn't even realize why I was, it's just that it was my muses talking to me that this has to get done. But not only that, I really wanted to be a musician, and I really wanted to be considered a legitimate musician. So the music, it was just something in my soul that I had to get it done, So it's all, when it finally comes together, I hope so. I hope it brings something to the table that everybody can really love and enjoy.
Well, we would love to keep this going, but we're going to start to wrap it up for this week. And Benny, if you will, my ECMC still pick. This is ECMC Transplant Hospital in Western New York near Buffalo. We're trying to help our friend, Mrs. Robin Restaino, receive a kidney she desperately needs. Again, 716-898-5001. Blood types are A negative, A positive, and O. And someday soon, hopefully in this new year, somebody will step up and help our good friend here locally, Mrs. Robin Restaino. Benny, I don't know. We lost our friend Mike the Class, but if you want to do our independent wrestler of the week.
Okay, and this is Joya Blake from Columbia, South Carolina. I'm just looking at her. I would like to issue an open challenge to Joya Blake. I'll meet you anywhere, anytime, for any type of match. Like Pedro Morales would say, I'm ready for any kind of action beats.
Yes, indeed. And our military salute to service this week.
Wow, way back. This Earl Caddick, U.S. Army World Heavyweight Champion, April 1917 February. That should have been 2020. Otherwise, it'd be 103 years. He beat Moolah, if that was the case, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
1920.
Yeah.
Wow.
Moolah.
Well, our military salute to him and his family, as we do each and every week here, a different person. Benny, my PSA for this week is Farm Aid. It's farmaid.org, and why not? We should help all of our USA, America farmers contribute, and they kind of help feed us across this country. So a worthy PSA for this week. Also, Mr. Payne, Mr. Peterson, we greatly appreciate you. We appreciate your time. Of course, we'd love to have you back, and I will reach out to you. We can go over that Steve Miller story. We can go over your movie coming out and everything. And Mike Messier, I'm sure you will join us again.
Yeah, I'd love to be on the follow-up with Maxx Payne. What an honor to talk with Max and Chris and Benny and Mike and all the wrestling fans. Do us a favor, the Twisted Turnbuckle, please copy and share this link, because I think this interview would be of great service to those that were enjoying WCW and the WWF in the early to mid 90s with Maxx Payne. And he's, like I said before, kind of like the Ultimate Warrior or Jeff Jarrett or Shane Douglas. Certain wrestlers just think outside the box, and sometimes these guys like Max don't get their proper credit. But for people like myself, I appreciate these guys who are outside the box thinkers. I really respect that a lot.
Well, we do. We definitely appreciate Mr. Payne, Mr. Peterson taking the time and joining us tonight live on this podcast, the Twisted Turnbuckle Podcast Show, live on the Playa Entertainment Network YouTube channel. And yes, please watch, like, and subscribe. And we will share this on social media, of course. And Mike the Class, we kind of went over your things for Benny because we didn't know what happened to you, but I'm glad you're back here towards the end of the show. And we thank Mr. Peterson.
All right, sounds good, guys.
Hey,
right.
before you go, Mike Messier,
Sure.
how do I know you, man? That your name sounds really familiar.
There used to he still does the commentating. Mark Messier he played with Wayne Gretzky, and as a matter of fact, when Messier and Gretzky played together, I believe they won 3 or 4 championships in a row. And then Gretzky, because of his wife Janet Jones, got traded to Los Angeles. Gretzky never won another championship in his career. Gretzky never won another championship, but Messier won a championship with the Oilers the very next year without Gretzky. And then about 5 or 6 years later, Mark Messier helped the New York Rangers win the Stanley Cup without any sign of Wayne Gretzky. So when people say, who is the greatest, they should probably answer Mark Messier. But I'm Mike Messier. I make the artwork and the Fighter Play basketball novel and the Mass Superstar that Chris has. And I'm at MikeMessier.com is my website. So that's all about my films and everything that I'm up to.
Well,
Awesome.
it's been an honor, you guys. I love doing this, but I especially love doing it with folks that are incredibly kind and good at what they do. And you guys were awesome. And I'll be on your show anytime, man. So
Nice.
I look forward to working with you again in the future. And don't hesitate a second if you need a guest sometime and somebody doesn't show up or you need my help. I give me a call. I'd love to work with you more.
Chris, maybe after Joya Blake beats me into a pulp, maybe Max can take my place on the show, right?
Well, maybe we can get Mr. Payne to be on our Hollywood Squares sometime.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm up for anything, and I really want to. I will make sure I send you the link for the Jimmy Kimmel interview, because I would really love for you all to. It's one of those things that once you see that, it should spark your curiosity, as well as you'll go, oh my God, that now I understand a little more about what I was talking about. So I'll make sure you get that.
Definitely. And Benny, of course, we will put it out there through social media, and we can't wait to have Mr. Payne back in the near future.
Absolutely.
Benny, why don't you take us out of here? Next
Alrighty.
week, we will have Mr. Neil Koloff as they're on the family Koloff tour with Melody Koloff, Ivan's granddaughter, and historian Mr. Tony Richards, live right here next Thursday night, February 12th. So until then, thank you. Take care and God bless.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Good night.